All right. Hello. Greetings, the damned. Welcome to Pod Damn America, the year finale episode, the end of our first solid year as a podcast. It's going to be a clip show, which is what they used to do in animation when they call it a cheater. When they wanted to make an episode, if they didn't want to actually make it, you just fill it with, us all reminiscing, sitting around going, remember that time we all argued about Nanette? And then, and it cuts to a clip of us arguing about Nanette. That's what's going to happen. But actually, I'm not doing it to be a cheater. I'm actually, there's a very specific reason that I put together a clip show for the end of the year. I'll explain. This is the end of like our first year as a podcast, I'd say. I started this show for people that are now listeners that haven't been on since the very beginning when, fucking 500 people listen to the show or whatever. Started this after Charlottesville when I guess I noticed a lot of the press that was going on around Charlottesville was very much like, the teens are calling it Antifa or whatever. I thought it would be interesting to use a platform that I had in terms of like social media followers and stuff to just make it like an informative, funny sort of pillory against that really shitty narrative that's still being trotted out today. So I got some people together. We put a little history together, a little history episode, a little drunk history on where anti-fascist action and all that shit comes from. And then we did it a few times, kind of rotating cast of people I was working with. And the show eventually kind of fell apart because as a creative type, I've always got like 10 different projects going, and you never know which one's going to pop off. So you just kind of work diligently on all of them, But I kind of put this show on the back burner for a while. And later that year, in December of last year, 2017, some pals of mine who we're kind of in the same place with their podcast, I think. It was called Left Gist, and it was essentially my three co-hosts who had a leftist kind of comedy podcast, and I think maybe they ran out of steam, just working on it or whatever. I don't want to speak on behalf of them. I don't know exactly what happened, but a couple of them kind of came to me and said, hey, you want to collaborate, maybe like smash these things together? And we all sat down at a bar, we talked about it, and we did that, right? So we said, okay, we'll give it a shot. We'll start trying to make this show happen and kind of put our creative forces together. And I think in that process, some good stuff sort of galvanized, Start to realize we've got this team of people. I've got a little bit of a social media following and shit. A bunch of psychos know who I am from Cumtown and shit like that. I've got people who can get people in the door. I can host the show, promote it and stuff, and then it's like you got Raghav Mehta. Raghav Mehta's got a journalism background. He knows all these cool people, these smart people that we can interview on the show and stuff like that. He's a fucking funny comic, Alex Patax, a maniac. He's hilarious. He can show up and be funny any fucking time. He's got a great brain for leftism too. He teaches me all sorts of shit I didn't learn in college. Anders is a complete freak. I love him. He's you get encyclopedic knowledge of the life and times of all these fucking weird, third party candidates. Ralph Nader, people like that. He's another really smart dude. So we've got all got these like different sort of skills and backgrounds and stuff, and we throw them together and try to make this show Pod Damn America happen, right? So we started this in January of last year. We just sort of started meeting in like a friend of mine's apartment because there wasn't any room in my fucking place at the time, and I had thought that I don't know. I had a good feeling about the new year. Oh boy, was I wrong! But I had a good feeling in the New Year's of 2017 because if you've never heard this story before, I haven't really told it in quite some time, but it's vaguely referenced sometimes on our podcast and just right about me in general. I had a bike last year. It was fucking stolen. It was actually, I guess, a year and a half ago at this point. Over the summer, my bicycle was stolen. I fucking, it's a piece of shit bike, but I used it to work. I'm a bicycle delivery person. That's my day job, and I cared for it like dearly. I made it myself. I hand painted it. I painted it matching, with my girlfriend at the time. We made these spooky Halloween bikes, and used it to just sort of like fucking do battle with New York City every day, And it wasn't an expensive bike; it's a piece of shit. Didn't really matter, but it had sentimental value because, like, I didn't even learn to ride a bike till I was like 25, because I don't know, I was a shitty kid and just a fucked up East Texas upbringing in the shitty streets of Houston. Missed a lot of stuff, and it was just like a secret of mine for a long time. I just tried to, I'll just avoid it until I grow up. And then when I was living in Austin, and thinking about moving to New York, my car fell apart, and I had to just buy a bicycle at if anyone in Austin, I bought my first bicycle at Austin Yellow Bike, which is like a co-op, which I think I've heard is like low-key anarchists, but it's a bicycle co-op where you can, first of all, you can do your community service there if you get in trouble with the fucking law, which is really cool. Community service then consists of like repairing bicycles for people and learning to fix bikes. And they sort of have these programs where if you hang out and you learn bike repair, you can build your own bike and take it. It's very mutual aid. It's very cool, right? So I got a bike from Yellow Bike, and then I, at 25 years old, just taught myself to ride it in the like parking lot of some middle school, a bunch of children probably laughing at me and shit. It fucking sucked, right? But I just threw myself into this parking lot and was like, you know what? This is gonna happen, or I'm not I'm not gonna make it home. I'm just gonna force myself into the situation, and it was super embarrassing and cathartic and weird. But by the end of it, I fucking made it home, and then the next day, oh fuck, I'll take it to work instead of taking the goddamn metro bus that doesn't work in Texas very well. So I started biking all over the city and shit. Lo and behold, 25 years old, I started learning to ride a bike, and because I was new at biking, even though I was a grown man, I was essentially like a child. Like, I fucking loved it. And I ended up, getting really into bicycles and learning to like build them and work on them and stuff like that. So I moved to New York with this bike, not the same one. I had a few get stolen, but this bike, jokingly called Bicycle J Fox for a long time. Joke kind of got worn out, but you get it. I take it here. Me and my friend David, we throw our bikes in the back of his truck. We drive fucking across the country. Move to New York. He takes off. If you came out and saw his band play, they called Too Bad. That was my friend David. Me and him moved here together. I use this bike to survive in this fucking city, basically. I would not be, doing any of this shit or really making it in this city, I think, if I did not have this fucking bicycle, my trusty bike, right? So it got stolen a year and a half ago over the summer, and, it sucks, but the reason I keep shitty bikes around and I use them is because they're disposable. They get stolen, you can get another one, right? So I got another one. A friend of mine hooked me up. A couple friends of mine, actually. Mishka Shubali did a merch fundraiser, threw me some cash. I gave it to Nate from WrestleSplania fame. He gave me one of his old bikes. We all were happy, right? And what happened after that is I rode this bike that I bought from him for work for a little bit, for like 6 months. So New Year's Eve of last year, me and some friends and my ex or whatever were walking we're walking down fucking Wyckoff Street in Bushwick, and it's over by like House of Yes, or the crazy fucking weird New Year's Eve Studio 54-ish sort of Montreal parties are happening all the time. We're walking past all this shit, and I'm in the middle of a sentence, and I'm like, yeah, so anyway, what the holy shit, that's my bike. I turned, and I fucking saw my bicycle chained to a pole, and I knew it was mine because I hand-painted it. It looks like a goddamn tiger, you know? So, when this happened, I didn't know what to do. I ran around. I started going up to people and go, does anyone know who owns this bike? You know, this is my fucking bike, right? And I'm drunk already because it's New Year's Eve. And we were shit-faced at, 7 p.m. or something. So I start going to people go, oh, does anyone know, who owns this bike? It's mine. It's probably just stolen. I just want to know where you got it. Yeah. No one can tell me where this bike came from, right? I go up to a cop. I go, hey, it's my stolen bicycle. The cop just fucking looks at me and goes like, oh, can you prove it's yours? He asked me if I had a receipt. I go, no, I made the bike. You can't, go up to another cop. I just look at him. He just shakes his head. I'm like, God, fuck these fucking people. Like, what crime do you fight? I literally solved the case for you and, wouldn't even talk to me. All cops are beautiful, as we say. So all this happens. I go into a bodega that it's sort of in front of. I ask people, no one knows anything. Okay, fuck it. There's cameras in front of this bodega, right? So I get an idea. I run fucking 2 miles back to the restaurant where I work at the time, grab the new bike that I have, grab some markers and some tape and shit. I bike back there, freezing fucking cold. And what I did is I locked my new bicycle to my old one and to the pole at the same time, locked them all together, right? And I left a note, and the note said, hey, here's my phone number. Text me if you own this bike. It's stolen. I'm not saying you stole it, but, I just want to know who you got it from so I can, figure out who the fuck stole my bike, right? Go up the chain there, right? And I was planning on letting the person keep it. I just wanted to get some retribution, right? So I go out, I get drunk, New Year's Eve, yada, 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 dumb bullshit, Twitter, a bunch of people standing around a kitchen awkwardly as the fucking ball drops. Oh, fucking 2018, fuck 2017, fuck 2017, right? All that shit. You're mad at a year, completely unaware that you're going to feel the exact same way in 1 year. All this happens. I wake up the next day, no phone call, right? And I'm like, God damn, well, that sucks, But, it's all locked together. It means they probably couldn't get they would have had to have snapped my chain to get their bike back. You see what I'm saying? It's all locked together via my chain, right? So I go to this street in front of House of Yes in the morning, and the note's gone, and their fucking chain is gone. They gave my shit back. And, they took their chain that they had used to lock the bike to the pole off, rendering it all connected via my shit. So then I take my chain off, bam, 2 bicycles, right? So I got my stolen bicycle back last year. This is maybe one of the coolest things that's ever happened to me, right? Because that fucking never happens, right? And this was New Year's Day of 2018. New Year's Day, right? So that day, I had a feeling it was going to be a good year. I had a feeling it was going to be the year of fucking street justice, all right? It was a good omen for the year. And, mixed bag, I'd say, this year. But, but then shortly after that, we decided to start meeting and really working on the podcast and getting it together and getting a concept together and sort of going, figuring out what this is going to look like. We're going to have these, deep dive episodes. We're going to have ones where we just do comedy shit, just shoot the shit, right? We're going to try and put something out that, that will gain a sort of following, and it'll be like a product worthy of, your $5, your Patreon subscription or whatever, right? And it's going pretty well until, it's just sort of chugging along. Projects go. You just kind of hit a wall where you start getting like, all right, we got like 1,000 listens a month or a week or whatever. What do we do? And it starts to go on the back burner again. Then in May of this year, you probably know if you're a listener to this show, I got my spot blown up by the Department of Homeland Security. And when this happened, I was able to spin it into some gold, I think. There's a person described luck to me a while back as luck is like the combination of the opportunity coming along and you being prepared for it, right? That's luck. So I think that's kind of what happened, because I've had opportunities kind of come and go in my career as a comic, and it sucks when you go, oh, I probably could have capitalized on that a little more. I probably could have jumped on that. Probably could get a job out of that. Sometimes they go. But this one, I thought, okay, I think I know how to play this when it happened, because, if the government's going to fuck with me like this, I'm going to tell the story. I'm a fucking storyteller, and I'm going to tell it to the right people and in the right way that it gets out there. And, A, is a funny story, and B, we're able to kind of get something of political value out of it, which I think I did, and I'm continuing to do, as I am continuously watched by the world's most bored and confused Homeland Security agent, having to learn all these gritty memes and shit. Just join us, man, or woman. Anyway, so this happened, and then I hit up our friends over at Chapo Trap House. Like, hey, I got a story for you, right? And we go tell the story, and then from there, before that, Catherine Krieger from Splinter interviewed me, and then and Chapo, and then I went a little viral, and fucking made the rounds, did a bunch of podcasts and stuff, went on the Majority Report, met all our friends over there, Michael Brooks, Antifadas, all those people, and then this show, started to pick up a little traction, and from there, we've been able to grow into something pretty healthy, I think, looking at our numbers and the amount of people that I meet who, come out to like live shows and stuff, or just like DM me when I'm losing my mind with helpful advice and stuff like that. This is a base, like a fan base and like a following or just a community or whatever that I've never really achieved as a comic. So I'm fucking stoked about it. I kind of feel like I've finally hit some level of like, okay, this is now becoming a thing that is not just your fucking open mic that you run that your 5 friends go to or whatever. So I feel really cool. I'm really happy with Pod Damn America. But which is to say, and the reason that I'm doing this clip show here is because I feel very grateful to the guests that we've had come on this show throughout the course of our growth through our first year sort of becoming a thing. And I'm especially grateful to a lot of them that, maybe were in the earlier episodes before we really got the pop, or, or had to be kind of shuffled behind the paywall because we just make a certain amount of content and some stuff has to go back there or whatever. And so, like, as a thank you to everyone who's helped and come and contributed all of their wisdom and all this stuff and all your jokes and all this shit right to the show, I wanted to do like a best of and just sort of showcase all the cool people we've had come on the show and maybe some of our stuff too or whatever. But yeah, because you guys got this shit off the ground to begin with, and it's very cool, and we couldn't have done it without you. So, all these people, by the way, open invitation to come back on the show. We'll be obviously doing 2 a week of these for fucking 2019 and beyond. So, yeah, I don't know. Thank you very much for being on Pod Damn America, the goth socialist podcast. Another thing, I fucking forgot about this. Another thing I should probably address is if you're listening and you're scratching your head, what the fuck is this goth socialist podcast joke that's been kind of just made its way into the show's canon? I kind of want to explain. As long as we're here at a milestone, a waypoint in the podcast where a lot of people are listening, the goth thing, the reason it became a thing as a bit is that when we first started to get some listeners, Matt Christman came on the show and he said, "Oh, you should call your fans Dammers." And we thought, "Oh, that's fun." They're, it sounds like they're Quakers or some weird, turn of the century, like religious movement or something. Dammers. So we called the listeners Dammers for a while. Because if you have a podcast, you have to call your listeners a thing. I don't know why. And I don't know, it wasn't really sticking, right? And then so I went on their Twitter and I did a poll. I said, 4 options. What do you guys want to be called? Dammers, the Damned, Damn Fam, which was my personal favorite, or something else. I don't even remember what the other one was. And fucking by and large, the fan base at that time chose to be called the Damned. So I actually kind of liked it because I thought it's very intense and it's just very like serious, you know. The Damned. So I sort of started running with that joke, but honestly, over the months doing the show, I kind of realized that it's actually not a bad aesthetic at all, for at least a lot of my sensibilities. And I think I had this in common with like Jamie over at Antifada, where the more we talked about it, because she also kind of refers to her shows or their show as a goth socialist podcast, is that like, no, I actually really do. I do enjoy a lot of gothy sort of gothic aesthetic. Like I'm, the type of person who wears primarily black clothing and am into certain types of music and, one of those fucking Halloween people and shit. But I feel it's a little funny because I feel like I dragged my other co-hosts into this concept very much against their will. Look at these fucking guys. I mean, they're a lot of things, but they're not maybe goth, I would say. We got Raghav. Raghav is, I'd say, actually, he's like he's very into like Mitski and like Kate Bush and that sort of thing is where I would peg him. He's like a cool, moody, these guys from Minnesota, like a what's the word? Replacement sort of vibe. I don't know. I'll have to ask him this on mic. We should do a roundabout discussion of what our various aesthetics are. He's a very Midwestern dude, same with Anders. The only band I even know that he likes is Y, because he's a T-shirt. And then you got Alex, who is quite the team player in this, in that he's just started talking like spooky, like Vincent Price or the guy from Saturday Night Live, as this theme has sort of come together. But actually into exploring this niche and this part of my mind, at least, we met some cool other people that are kind of like along the same lines here, like the people over at Black Banner podcast and stuff like that, and I don't know, some people will have on in the future who I can't really name yet, but I got a very exciting guest lined up to talk about the Dispossessed. So anyway, that's where that came from. I've met a few listeners who were like, what the fuck is this Count Chocula shit? That's what it is. Don't worry about it. It doesn't really have anything to do with the leftist bones of the show. If you're just here for the political shit, it's more just my sense of humor. Okay, I'm into creepy crawly shit. Anyways, yeah. So that's I guess my state of the podcast speech or whatever for the end of 2018. Fuck 2018, man. Thank you guys for listening so much, and I'm excited for a lot of the shit we have coming up in the new year. I will announce more of it as the show continues and on the Twitter feed and all this stuff, and possibly maybe we'll get some sort of community together. If we try to figure out, well, their subreddit is the thing, so that's good. Thank you, Reasonable Skin and all you fucking freaks. Facebook group if you guys want to do that. I don't know. Hit me up and tell me. One last thing. So we are expanding a little bit, and I'm getting the show up on we're on YouTube now, for example. So if you're one of those fucking people, if you're like a weird conservative guy that takes videos of himself in his car talking about individualism or fucking classical liberalism or whatever, or you got to respect the office. One of those people. If you're a YouTube person, we're on YouTube, so that'll be cool. But as I've been sort of uploading our show onto things like YouTube, and probably this is going to be a thing with Spotify soon, I started to realize, we got pinged a few times for for just straight up stealing content, like music and shit. So I have to probably stop just using music. I used a Billy Joel song in an episode, and yeah, there's a robot that can tell you're using Billy Joel and comes after you. What a Black Mirror episode we live in. There's a Billy Joel robot out there. So because of that, I have to start using more like independent music, or using music from smaller bands and stuff like that, or producing our own shit. But if you listen to the show and you'd like to pitch us music, send me stuff to poddamnamerica@gmail.com. I'll listen to it, and if it's cool, I'll put it on the show, and I'll credit you and stuff, and I'll put it in the show notes and all that stuff. And yeah, we can do a little, I'll get you some exposure, or get your shit listened to. We'll get to use the music that won't get us fucking raided by fucking Billy Joel kicks in the door to my apartment, and then I really get taken away to Long Island. Yeah, so I don't know, hit me up about that. We've already done it a couple times. Mr. Maxwell, some other people. It's been really cool. So yeah, that might be a thing that we have to look into as we grow. So it's a good problem to have, right? Anyways, yeah, here's some cool people that have been on the show. I will intro them as we go into their clips. But thank you, The Damned, for all of your support and for helping us grow the damn show. And for talking to me as I went crazy last month. All right, here we go.
Lock them into positions of hopelessness and helplessness. The government gives them the drugs, builds bigger prisons, passes a 3-strike law, and then wants us to sing God Bless America. No, 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 not God Bless America. God damn America. That's in the Bible for killing innocent people. God damn America for treating us citizens as less than human. God damn America as long as she tries to act like she is God and she is supreme.
As the white person present today, this is not you are excluded from this. But I think that Hannah Gatsby's point of view did come from a white guilt perspective, right? Where I think when you add the addition of, like, despite the fact that she's queer and she's a woman, you're white, right? And we've all seen it last year of, like, white women voted for terrible people, white women are helpers of colonialism and horrible shit, right? So she is speaking from this point of where she's like, I don't think that I'm doing any good by doing self-deprecating material that speaks badly about other women or about other queers or about anything like that, because she doesn't want to take the position of oppressor even for a second to make a joke. You understand me? I think those of us who are like you and like me and like your guests defending the fact that we get to make fun of this thing and are empowered through making fun of it are all speaking from the position of not having power and speaking from the position of we didn't used to be allowed to talk about these things. Like, I don't know if you guys have ever seen White Chicks. Have you seen White Chicks? Listen, my
I'm excited to where this is going.
My comparisons range from White Chicks to Picasso. I will have everybody know I talk to comics about Picasso.
Did he design those
beforehand.
masks on White Chicks, Picasso?
I don't even know.
The facial.
But White Chicks, no, what was important about White Chicks that people don't realize is it was the first instance ever in the history of humanity in which white women were represented by non-white people.
For sure. Yeah, it was the first blackface.
Because think about the fact that before that, a black young man, if he said anything in the direction of a white woman, it could literally mean you get lynched, right?
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
All the way to we're literally putting on masks and mocking you and calling you Becky and saying this is what we see you all as. And that was the joke. That was the brilliance behind the movie, was that, like, historically this was like, what the fuck?
Yeah.
Holy
Dude,
shit.
forget Bechdel. I'm looking for the Wayans test.
Yes,
You know?
exactly. I fucking love that movie. And the thing is, for years I've been telling people about, like, I'm telling you, this is really important. So that's what I mean, is comedy does have that power that she wants to deny. I think what she's saying is that she doesn't want to have the responsibility of picking it up, because, like, those dudes that went to the fucking Old Man Hustle thing, all they were doing was thinking, like, being a comedian is just transgressing. And it's not. Being a comedian is transgressing in a way where they still like you after you do it, and you're able to pull them back and make them think about it.
Well, you learn
build
so
some
much about
tension.
people's worldview.
Yeah, I know. Then we get into sounding like...
The idea of the witch was kind of generated in large part by the church in the Middle Ages to sort of push patriarchy and capitalism, right? Like that's not something.
Yeah.
There weren't that many self-identified practitioners of witchcraft, or really any, as far as I know. It was just like an invented thing that they did to kind of.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of them were midwives or healers who helped women have control over their own bodies and their own reproduction. A lot of them were activists, both against feudal oppression and against the beginnings of capitalism, in favor of, keeping community-held lands and things like that. I haven't read the whole book, but Sylvia Federici wrote a really influential text called Caliban and the Witch, Women, the Body, and Primitive Accumulation, and makes a very good case for this, the preponderance of witch burnings across Europe to be a way of primitive accumulation via women's bodies, women's reproductive systems, right? Because in the Marxist conception of capitalism, it's not just, it's like, why do some people own shit and some people have to work for them? Is it because the owners just like worked the hardest, or like their ancestors did? No, it's because somewhere along the line at the beginning, someone decided to play by some new rules and do a thing called primitive accumulation, where you take things that aren't yours, like either by expropriating commonly held land or by doing settler colonialism on a new landmass full of people who you can dominate with guns, germs, and steel, or in the case of women's bodies, like the act of reproduction. Because before capitalism, or before agriculture, people tried to limit the number of kids that they had because they were traveling around and they were hunting and gathering. After agriculture, and especially after class society arose, people needed to have more kids because they would increase their production that way, and by that they would generate a surplus. So that's the reason, going back a number of years, why women were first sort of forced into these roles. This is not something that has existed throughout history, and that's a common misconception that people have.
I don't believe it.
And so yeah, like the building trades unions, because like they benefit from all the construction going up in Seattle, like they're, one, historically building trades are especially reactionary, almost as reactionary as the police. So reactionary as in like conservative. And
right. These are like unions against the people.
Yeah, basically.
Yeah.
And it culminated in this. They were really savvy. There was this one situation where when Amazon announced that because of the potential tax, they were going to stop construction on a building. Like they had like this was written up in the news, and like everyone was saying, "Oh, what are we gonna do? Amazon is actually going to stop construction. Like there's so many jobs that are being created with that." Classic like really shake shit up, get people scared because Amazon is not supporting our economy type stuff. So like we had a press conference, a public press conference, which was our first mistake. We announced it, and like me and Shama Sawan and like a bunch of other people, like we show up right in front of the Bezos balls. They're called the Amazon spheres. Yeah. But we like to call them the Bezos balls.
Yeah.
And we see all these dudes in hard hats, and and as soon as Shama like starts to speak, Shama is one of the council members who's a socialist. She's part of the socialist alternative. She's great. As soon as she starts to speak, we hear like just like all these dudes in hard hats saying, "No head tax, no head tax, no head tax." Of course, it was like maybe like 20 of them, and maybe there were like 15 of us, but the optics of it, just because like there were news people there, made it especially like covering all these dudes in hard hats, like all together in hard hats, all part of all part of like one local of a steelworkers union.
So they were actual steelworkers. They weren't a bunch of like data nerds wearing hard hats.
Well,
really skinny.
Here's the thing.
They were protesting circumcision.
They were
wearing the
told
hard
to
hats.
be there by their union boss, who was leading the thing, and so like it was classic business unionism. Like he was basically like because we asked one of the just like construction people, hey, like why are you here? Like, do you know what this is about? They're like, I don't know why I'm here. I was just told to be here, and I'm here. So. It's a classic situation where the rank and file union members aren't really like are being told to do something, and that
it's are we the baddies? That whole situation.
Exactly. And so like that's that which is really sad because we had support from like so many other unions. We could have brought in bus drivers, teachers, and all sorts of people that supported the tax.
Right.
And we did like during the public comment just a few days later, like at City Hall. And so it's like some of those own goals that we had. I wish we
this time not even until after the primaries. They started beefing it up.
Yeah.
So I got connected to the people running digital for Bernie, and they're like, oh yeah, Daniela was like, hey, Ricardo's doing amazing stuff. He translated all of our Feel the Burn things, and you guys should use him. He's a great dude. Blah blah blah. And they're like, oh yeah, sure. Well, whatever you can help with, man, that's amazing. I was like, hey, bro, I have been sending you guys things that you guys have done wrong for months, but fine. And so eventually I finished my Navy time and I was free.
Yeah.
And I did everything I could for the campaign. I had there wasn't a freaking town hall with Telemundo and Facebook. So it was all on Facebook, and people were submitting their questions. And from like 7 o'clock to like 9 o'clock, Bernie was going to be answering the questions, and the answers would be typed in English, and I would be providing the Spanish translation, copy paste, put it all in there. The answers are there. So he answered like 20 questions, right about, of all the questions that were submitted. I went to the headquarters in DC, and that's where I met him. That's where we talked. We talked for like 45 minutes afterwards. It was a really good experience. And eventually I came to find out that was my job interview. And,
oh, nice.
Yeah, and it was amazing. It was a great time, and that's how I just got involved with the campaign, and then it started. Pretty much all my time was to work for the campaign.
Sure.
And Bernie got like 14.2 million votes in the primary, and 12 million votes in the primary, I believe, and about 4.2 million of those votes were Latinos.
Yeah.
And I'm glad, I want to believe that I helped out, in that process, because a lot of the Latinos that voted for Bernie were first-time voters, and a lot of young people would be. One of the things that I loved listening to, or people just would contact me and be like, hey man, somebody came to the office, this is young cat holding one of our paper, one of our Spanish literatures, and we'd be like, hey man, you guys did this, man, and you gave it to my mom, and she can't vote, but you did this for her, man, this is awesome, and so I'm voting for this guy, man, how can I help? And I was like, oh,
that's amazing.
Yeah, and that story would repeat over and over and over, and showing that inclusiveness, right? That we care about even those who can't vote. I think that what turned a lot of people in, and to help and to participate in the campaign and be part of this big movement. And I freaking loved it, man. And I remained engaged all throughout. Obviously, eventually, when we lost the primary, then the process was to help and make sure that everybody came along and voted for the Democratic candidate.
Right.
So about 92% of the Latinos that voted for Bernie went for Hillary.
Yeah, sure.
That's amazing. That's a huge number. So a lot of people who tell you, oh, all those Bernie or bust and all those Bernie bros and whatever, man, it was like 80% of all Bernie voters voted for Hillary.
Yeah.
Water comes from Northern California. There is a lot of controversy since the time California was colonized by white settlers about where the water goes and what it's used for, and we've completely drained huge areas of California that were fertile and are now not, and now Los Angeles is. So you really can't just draw arbitrary lines throughout the state and say these are now 3 separate states, because what you end up with is the Bay Area, which is like pretty much fine in terms of water. And then you get Northern California, which is full of flooding, and then you get Southern California, which is full of fires. So it's just like if
Fire state, water state, land state. It's like Pokemon.
Yeah, we need an air state.
It was Bulbasaur County.
That's the cloud, dude.
Yeah.
The cloud is just the air state, the air version of the government.
Yeah.
It just doesn't work. And there's a really good, I sent you this article from the Sacramento Bee that's a good like primer on that as to like where the water comes from. But it just like, no, if you divided California into 3 states, 2 of them wouldn't have the means to support people, you know what I mean? And then one state would be exporting its water to another state, and it would make it even more complicated and difficult than it already is, which is, let me emphasize, very bad. Shit's real bad, and carving up the state would only make it worse. I mean, literally, this is called a war. There would be water wars. There were water wars in California.
Yeah.
Like about 100 years ago, and like they would just come back. I don't know if you know this, but humans need water. To live.
I've been drinking mostly Miller High Life, so you know if they ever shut off where that comes from, then I'm gonna get real mad.
Woo! Yeah, they're gonna privatize one small. I mean, it'll be like the Vatican. The Miller Brewery will be like the Vatican, where it is subject to its own set of laws.
Yeah.
And they give you huge tariffs on your shitty beer.
We'll have to make a weird noir movie about me taking up arms to blow this whole thing wide open. Every
aspect of California that these fucking billionaires use to push the idea that California should, and it's not just billionaires, it's also like it's a sort of a left-wing idea that California should secede or whatever, that's a different, the Cal exit thing, that's kind of different, but like every proposal like this just shows the massive ignorance of the people that live here towards like the history of the state and how it actually works. You know what I mean? California doesn't work like any other state. Its resources are not evenly distributed. Its economy is way bigger than any other state. Like you can't just come in and be like, I drew tape down the middle of the room. Now that's your side. Like fuck you, dude. Like you don't understand.
Well, a sitcom plot would be a fitting way to end the history of California.
It's like he's trying to create wacky neighbors, but those wacky neighbors are going to murder each other or die of thirst. Like California is profitable because of water we steal from the Colorado River. Like, all our agriculture, all that green, what is it? The green wave, all the weed, all the fucking almonds, everything you love about California. If there's no water, it's not there.
Yeah, and also the SoundCloud rappers need water or they'll die.
They do, and you need water to mix with your Soylent, I think, so that you can stay alive.
You certainly need water to podcast.
You need water to absolutely a pot of water. Have you seen those little like bubbles?
No.
Oh, it's so fucked up.
That sounds like some California shit, though.
It's Japanese.
Fuck your bottled water. How about a circle of water?
It's more organic.
It's $10. It's free if you're at a music festival for some reason.
It's fucking cool. It's like made out of cellulose, like seaweed. It's like they're pioneering plastic alternatives, and so it's like it straight up looks like a video game where you have like a big drop of water you hold in your hand. And
cool.
Then you can just go, like,
oh man, you got me with the video game shit.
Yeah, it's really cool looking.
All right, that's sick.
Yeah, if you look up videos online, it's dope, and so you can drink the the bottle.
I thought you were gonna say it was like You ever get school lunches when you were a kid with just the plastic bag full of chocolate milk and like the the Capri Sun straw?
Totally, yeah.
Impossible situation for a child.
That's gross. That's not This is one where it's like you drink the pure clear water and then you drink the pure clear bottle and you just are one in the cloud,
rules.
man.
All right, you guys. I mean, how would you describe this? Is it cloned? Is it synthetic? Like the fish material you're making? Does it solve this problem?
The hope is that it can solve a lot of these problems. So it isn't cloned. So what we're doing is just imitating the exact process that goes on inside of a fish, outside of a fish. So we're pulling out this cell type that can grow out, and it already exists. It exists inside of us. It exists inside of fish, but we're pulling them out from specific species. And the hope is that if we can take this and grow it outside of a fish instead of inside of it, that means that we can stop all these problems at the same time. Because the idea is that people would switch to this, since our logic is people really care about how much their food costs and what it tastes like. And we're like, well, we're going to be cheaper and we're going to taste just as good or better, because it is the exact same thing, even on a cellular level. It's not really, it's not like a vegetarian replacement type thing. It's not like the Impossible Burger. It's like a real chunk of meat.
Now, what will you be doing for customers who are looking for the suffering in the food?
They can know that I work at the company.
Hey,
oh, that's true.
They can know that you have to clock in on Mondays.
They can talk to my ex-wife. You know what I'm saying?
It's a podcast
That's
for men.
cute that you think I have to clock in on Mondays.
Okay.
It was the Standing Rock tribal police that came in and arrested and raided and evicted the camp by order of the tribal chairman. So the chairman is the one that voted and signed off on his own tribal police under his jurisdiction to come in and kick everybody out after Trump had already greenlit the pipeline, which proves that that whole shit with Obama on December 4th was just performative at best.
Why would he do that?
Here's why. So this is real interesting. Is Barack Obama, he never came to Standing Rock during the Standing Rock movement, but he was there in 2014. 2 years before this movement ever started. He was there meeting with David Archambault, the tribal chairman, and David Archambault has a sister by the name of Jody Gillette Archambault, right? This is the tribal chairman's sister.
Uh-huh.
So she's really interesting because she graduated from Dartmouth in 1992 and has been, she received a Bush Foundation fellowship and started working for the United States government, part of the Bureau of Indian Affairs. The Bureau of Indian Affairs is a subdivision of the Department of Interior, right? Which is like, the Department of Interior is, so right, this woman, Jody Gillette Archambault, the tribal chairman's sister, worked in the Obama administration, and Barack Obama personally created a position in his White House for her. She was the first ever White House liaison to the tribes. She was appointed this position in 2011. This is 5 years before the Standing Rock movement even happened.
Right.
So she's appointed to this position in Obama's White House in 2011. In 2014, her brother becomes the tribal chairman in 2013, her brother becomes the tribal chairman in Standing Rock on a pro-oil platform. In 2014, Obama comes to the Standing Rock Reservation on which looks like a tour where he's shaking hands and kissing babies, right? He says, and I quote, "I love the Standing Rock Reservation and the Archambault family."
Okay, but do it in the voice.
I can't. I'm not going to do a Barack voice. So he says that in 2014, right? Yeah. And then flash forward to 2 years later, the movement started in April of 2016. Obama says nothing. People are attacked by dogs, shot with water cannons, tear gas, rubber bullets, all these terrible things, and Obama still says and does nothing. And and this is a guy that was at that reservation of all reservations 2 years prior.
Right.
He created a position for the tribal chairman's sister in his own White House. Like, he created that position just for her. And he did nothing until December 4th, after Trump had already been elected, who was pro-oil, so he could come in and act like he was the hero, knowing that it wasn't going to go through. And like, what did they talk about in 2014?
Lead detective.
There's a lot of crazy characters in this case, and one of them would be Detective Gregory Pemberton.
Oh, please tell me about the weird cops.
He was the one that was handed the Veritas information, and fucking is pretty much responsible for why the prosecutor, Jennifer Kirchhoff, was in the position that she was in.
Mind you that he has been retweeting Project Veritas and other right-wing organizations for years. And he talks about Black Lives Matter leftist thugs on Twitter. So you can understand
this
how
guy's
this
a
guy
fan
thinks.
of this guy's a fan of 4chan and like the poll aspect of the alt-right.
Oh yeah,
he's an alt-right cop.
Yeah.
It was like literally, and like this was the guy that was hired, paid full time, for a year and a half to work. To work on this case. So like, the top cop that they decided to like be their like lead investigator is like fucking Nazi adjacent.
Right.
So like as soon as the defense like pulled all this shit out, he showed all his tweets with all the fucking Nazi stuff and like. Yeah.
People are mad that Roseanne had like a TV show, but this is like if she was like the chief of police.
Chief of police. Exactly.
And believed
so
in Pizzagate and shit.
Like, so and like every day in court, this guy's coming in, and like there's like rumors that like there was an affair between him and the prosecutor. It's just crazy shit. That was another thing. Like Kirchhoff wanted to get all these like fucking like. She wanted to pull all this anonymity shit with the police witnesses and stuff, like fear of like backlash. Mind you, like a week after the fucking arrests, like all the J20 defendants were doxxed by Nazis because the MPD leaked their information to the fucking Nazi groups.
Right.
So yeah, she's like claiming all this thing, and she claims that she was sent a note to her home that read "Come fuck me." Sorry, can we keep a statement? It just shows how fucking she probably made it up. Like, who gives a fuck? Like, it's ridiculous. It's like all the she's trying to paint herself as like, oh, I'm being this embattled.
When I was just kind of starting out my career as a writer, I had like every 18-year-old boy like a real like Hunter S. Thompson fetish, except I was too neurotic to do drugs or anything. And I wanted to write a story on neo-Nazi clubhouses that I heard about in this wheat belt town in Western Australia called Wagen. And it's got the second highest suicide rate in the country at the time. I had cousins that lived a town over, a town called Narrogin, and I was hanging out with my mate Noel, and I was like, he was like, hey, I know some guys that have a neo-Nazi clubhouse in like an old sheep shed out in the bush. And takes me out there, and it's like that kind of thing. Your cool friends terrifying older brothers, like that was the vibe. You like open this like corrugated iron shed where they used to shear sheep that's now like rusty, and it's just like these kind of like fat neck-bearded kind of neo-Nazi types. So that classic like 2008 era of Reddit Nazi.
Yeah.
You know? And they've just got like the white nationalist flags. They got like swastikas, and they have like random like SS and like skulls.
So like pre like Trumpy MAGA guys.
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
So they didn't have the nice haircuts.
No. This is
So they were skinheads?
Yes. Well, they're like bush skinheads. Like this is like hardcore rural Western Australia. So this is like guys that could be running like a violent cold compound kind of thing.
So like the movie Green Room.
Yeah, a little bit like that, but not that good looking.
Okay.
Like just like methed out dudes who like live in a place where if you don't, like you either kill yourself or you leave, or you inherit your dad's farm. Like that's
the guys from the True Detective meth farm.
Yeah, more like that. Yeah, definitely more like that. And they're all just like sitting around listening to like hardcore like thrash metal or whatever, and I'm just like this terrified little nerd who's like very virginal and innocent at the time. There with my like very benevolent, saintly friend, and get talking to these guys, and I think it was like an hour in, I got drunk incredibly quickly, drinking their like bootleg whiskey or whatever it was, and I just start winding this guy up as I do because I'm used to like doing interviews where I just shit stir people.
Yeah.
And then
you decided to do this with the angry white supremacists.
Yeah. And like they must have been like, I guess I was 18, like they must have been maybe in their mid-30s. Fuck, I don't really even know. But I'm talking and then it's just like, ow! Like, fuck! Like a sudden like searing pain underneath my left rib, and the dude has just like stabbed me with a box cutter. And it's not like you can't even see a scar or anything like that, and it's not like it was like near my organs, but that part of your rib that's incredibly ticklish, that's where it got me, like right underneath there.
Oh, so it tickled.
Yeah, it tickled like hell. I was just laughing all the way to the bank. But then immediately, like, I was just like a shot of pain, like, fuck, I'm gonna like black out or have a panic attack. It was this feeling of like, it was just like this surreal feeling of like, you stabbed me.
Yeah. Did you kind of like realize you were stabbed a moment after? I always imagine you.
I was so manic, and like I'm the kind of person that'll like keep talking and then look down and be like, I'm bleeding to death, like kind of thing. But then my friend, again, he's like the loveliest guy, and at the time he looked like a lumberjack. He just like decked this guy, hoisted me over his shoulders, and like ran us through the paddock, jumped the fence, and like
what a hero.
Yeah, no, I got so many stories with that guy. 7 miles.
Carried
like
you
that.
through
He
the
was insane.
woods.
Yeah, he was like, "Oh, sorry, man, you those guys from high school." I was like,
That's a really good question. It's funny when I wrote this article for The Nation, which came out I think back in February, and I got a lot of email and comments on Twitter and stuff about it from people, and it was really interesting because the article, I don't ever address people as consumers in the article. I put Amazon in the context of a company that rose to this kind of power because our antitrust laws have failed. And I talked about what we need to do to adjust those laws. And so I was addressing readers entirely as citizens in the context of that article. But what was fascinating is that people who wrote to me overwhelmingly would say things like, I'm going to cancel my Prime account, let's boycott Amazon, I'm going to try to stop shopping there. And those are all worthwhile things to do. I mean, put your money to businesses that actually support your local community and that create good jobs where you live. I wholeheartedly endorse that. But I think the idea that a boycott would actually work or would be possible, or that the solution here is consumer action, I don't think it's on us as consumers to fix this. I think it's on us as citizens to fix this. And I think part of how we got into this mess with corporate consolidation and just, how many industries are now controlled by a few companies that are so ginormous that they control our politics, they control Congress. I mean, it's like we're living in this kind of increasingly this sort of form of corporate dictatorship. And the reason that part of how we've gotten there is that we've acquiesced to this idea that our power in the economy is as consumers, that when we want to try to affect change, we think about our shopping choices. And when you're shopping, it's like you're not very powerful. You can pick between Pepsi and Coke.
When I'm shopping.
You
I have
can
the
pick
sword,
between
high to low option and everything.
No, I'm just kidding. I entirely agree with what you're saying.
Yeah. Our citizen muscle is way more powerful. Corporations just don't want us to find it. And so I think here it's I don't want to boycott. I want people to go to their member of Congress. I want packing hearings and getting journalists to write about this. I want us to act as citizens.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think that's
a little something for mommy.
I'm sure all the women.
Yeah. Whoa. You seem a little bit too confident for the people you're speaking on behalf of. Can you imagine just if you
I love getting home and just having a good fuck session to the movie Cars.
Yes, I'm sure everyone found
there's a lot of Shrek porn out there.
I'm sure everyone found Donkey as sexual as I did.
I went to the party dressed as Shrek. I'm sure all the ladies were loving it.
Yeah.
We're all familiar with famed sex icon Sad from Inside Out, or Sadness from Inside Out.
Come on, that's
I'm sure all the ladies.
my entire wheelhouse.
I'm sure all the ladies who have watched
Inside Out.
I'm sure all the ladies who have watched Mr. Hands were turned on by my horse costume with me and Peter Thiel in the back. Anyway, fuck that guy.
Electric horse costume.
Yeah, shout out Elon Musk.
So Elon Musk also tweeted out this
Wasn't
week
a threat.
that he. All right, we gotta be careful doing fucking hip hop guns on this show.
DHS is gonna have a fun time with this episode.
But
we're gonna have a hard time leaving the country next week.
Maybe a really easy time leaving the country.
One of my favorite sort of sleeper tweets that Trump did a while back was getting super upset about elephants being taken out of the circus.
No fucking way.
That their sales have gone down.
Hold on, I'm gonna try to find it. Oh man,
folks, these majestic creatures, they eat peanuts. Where are they now? You don't get to see them. They're out living in some field.
They're balancing on balls for free, people. They
Not
just
smart.
do it. They just do it.
Not smart.
Leaving money on the table.
There's a lot of money to be made off of elephants on balls.
I have spent $5 million on paintings by elephants.
Is this real? Yeah. Okay, real Donald Trump. Ringling Brothers is phasing out their elephants. I, for one, will never go again. They probably use the animal rights stuff to reduce costs. That's from 2015. Holy shit. That was like when he was running for president.
I will fix.
I couldn't find it because if you search his and then elephants right now, it's just nothing but people that are furious at Melania for having gone to like Egypt.
I'm sorry, he did a follow-up tweet to it in 2016.
In 2016, at Ringling Bros is retiring their elephants. The circus will never be the same. Oh man, he's so bummed out. Oh God.
R.I.P. R.I.P. Watching an elephant try to kill itself.
Prince, like, I'm not someone who thinks he's infallible, and in fact, I think he should have been more strategic about this. But I think he's like stubbornly principled. I think that's like something that's actually not good. What's good about him is that he says the same thing. You could play like a continual tape from 1970 to now, and he's making the same points, which is admirable. But
I usually works against most old people.
Right, because he's so progressive.
I think his main problem is that he has an inability to explain the message of how what he's talking about with economic justice then translates to social justice, and the reason he doesn't
racial justice,
in racial justice and all these identity politics things, right? And the reason he doesn't have that skill set is because that's a extremely like 2010 to now like concept. We all just learned that.
Also, I think that's true. I also think his directness in itself, like, I don't think it's limited to that. He doesn't sugarcoat things. Now, I agree with you. He could do a better job. But it's also the media is, like, out there.
Looking for him to...
Like, so, what this famous thing where he talked about how we have to move beyond identity politics. He literally was saying that they are necessary but not sufficient. That was his hot take.
Yeah.
They are necessary but not sufficient. The media made it sound like he was saying we don't need them at all. Like they're not even necessary. And those are two very different things. I agree with you, but I also think that like no matter what he says, it's like he could, like when he said we need Hillary, when Hillary was like touring on bashing him and talking about what happened, he was like, we need Hillary's help. Like he wouldn't bash her back, and he was basically in a nice way being like, come on, we need you to help defeat Trump. People were like, fuck you, Sanders. Like, you don't get to... I think I tweeted as a joke. I was like, this misogynist wagging his finger, telling her what to do. And, like, I think Jen Kirkman.
Oh, yeah.
But she's like, it's crazy. But she was
friend
like...
of the show.
Yeah, I think she told him to, like, fuck himself with a chainsaw or something.
She told him to,
Oh, God.
Which is very
She's a storyteller.
But,
we have a long-standing... I've talked about this before, but I have planned to contact Jen Kirkman and tell her that I'm... in the brocialist podcast world, and that there's a lot of Putin infiltration going on, and if she could help me spread the word,
Well, but the thing that drives me crazy, by the way, about the sexism, Bernie Hillary stuff, is that I will get into. I know it's just Twitter, but Twitter is still a window into where people's souls would be if they had them. But I will get into fights with people on Twitter, and they'll say that Bernie is bad on women's issues, and I'll ask them why, what policy, and they will say his finger wagging and his dismissing Planned Parenthood as establishment organizations. And I'm like, okay, so it's not policy. Let's just be honest about it. And I pretend that I'm okay with it just being those two things. I'm not. I think that's bullshit. But for argument's sake and to be diplomatic, I'll be like, okay, I get it. It doesn't have to be about policy, but let's just be precise. So it's not the policy, it's discourse. And I'm like, discourse is politics, sure.
Very sort of left-leaning, some of them DSA-endorsed politicians who are putting out climate plans that actually are sort of at the scale of the problem, or at least approaching it. And so all of those folks have called for a Green New Deal, so to create sort of massive employment, projects to do some of the things we need to do on climate, like electrify huge parts of our grid, scale up renewable energy.
A war on planes.
A war on planes, yeah.
The way you described it in one of these articles was like the military footing for America going into World War II is like a controlled economy where everyone's making ships all of a sudden, and we need to be doing that for solar panels. Last year, I support the idea so much, and I would just love to see it catch on any more than it is right now.
Yeah, it's interesting because, right, like there may theoretically reach some point in which the GOP and which very conservative actors are just unable to continue pretending this isn't a problem. Once we have like horrible hurricanes hitting New York and like major centers of capital every year, which
More
is a
ones.
thing that could happen.
Yeah.
Once it threatens capital, like people will come around, and so I think one sort of way to confront that is like a sort of egalitarian redistributive approach, which is like we preempt some of this stuff, we understand that this is coming, and we act to prevent it. The other is a totally sort of dystopian like hellscape in which like Republicans control the answer to the problem and just like expand ICE to be the entire U.S. military, and sort of block climate refugees at the door. Will be the largest mass migration in human history potentially. So imagining Republicans dealing with that is sort of horrifying to think about. And so there are, I think that we will reach a point when people are doing things about climate, and whether that's something that's good and, is better for most people in the country, or whether that's something totally horrifying and awful.
Yeah, and it's interesting to hear.
So there are these people, and there's about a handful of them that are sort of isolated and interviewed in this documentary that are really into making these haunted houses. There's their various wives and husbands who are referred to. They all have like in-group.
I think they're called haunt widows.
They're called haunt widows. Yeah. They have all this. So it is kind of about a subculture
It's
because
so much jargon. I love it. I think the reason why we all really got like connected to it because like replace haunting with comedy, and it's like a story about our lives. pretty much.
It really is.
It's a parallel really easily, and
it was a bit of a mirror
because it's such a niche thing. It's like easy to watch and go like, oh, look at these psychos, but then like you start to compare it to other more niche things that you're into, and it's like, wow, why do I know what a fucking street joke is? Or like,
what do I know the Borscht Belt? What do I know? Like, yeah.
So it's like how many stones can you throw? Like one of the good inside references or the vocabulary that they use.
Jargon,
they keep using the term boo scare.
Yeah. Really, the haunted house, really, you go from boo scare to blackout. That's really the scale.
That's like their one-liner. They're like, it's a boo scare.
It's a boo scale is a one-liner. It's just like, haha. And the blackout is a one-woman show or a one-person show.
Yeah.
Like Nanette is a blackout.
What liberalism does is it essentially what it is a project of uprooting. The liberalism takes the feudal subject who is embedded in and he is not defined by his identity or himself. He's defined by his relationships. He's defined by a web of connections to other people. He is holistic. The liberal subject is an individual, is a monad, is unconnected to others, has no other definition other than his own, there's no way that connections to others increase any sort of sense of reality for that person. That person is fully defined as an individual being. That's what liberalism says. It power washes. Like imagine a bunch of ball bearings and they're covered in like caked dirt and mud. And the mud is our connections to other people and institutions and systems of belief and the things that make us full human. Liberalism is basically a fucking giant hose that says no, those connections don't make you who you are. You are a self-contained being. You are not connected to others in any meaningful sense. And then what liberal political theory is at base, it is figuring out how to make these individuals that can no longer relate to one another by context, can only relate to one another as individuals who have no other outside context. How can they relate to one another in a way that doesn't lead to death for everything? A cooperative existence. Liberalism is how to negotiate the distance between people that liberalism created in the first place.
Yeah.
With transactions.
Yes. It turns human relationships, all human relationships, into transactions.
Yes.
And that is the difference between that and the feudal subject. And so that is the world that liberalism and conservatism and fascism, all these things, and also communism come from, is that the demystification of the self created by the uprooting from feudal traditions.
What I would say is liberalism does not see you as stones held together by mud. They see you as individual stones being sprayed with the hose and then put into my bucket. I sell stones.
Yes,
I'm
exactly.
starting a stone business.
It turns
and
us
it doesn't
all-
sound like there's a big turnaround, but there actually is if you go to the right places where they don't have stones.
Because if you don't have human connections, the only way to resolve a conflict between total strangers that are alienated from each other's existences is through combat and through conflict. And liberalism says, well, that's not workable. Everyone will eventually be destroyed in Ragnarok. You have to negotiate these transactions and the distances, and that's what liberalism does. It creates the institutions for that. That is why the most parasitic and vital petty bourgeois profession that glommed onto capitalism as it broke from feudalism is the legal trade. It's law, because law is what grew to fill in the spaces left by the erosion of social ties. Because you need law to negotiate these new relationships between strangers that have no understanding of obligation to one another. That is that transmission, the language of it is law. And so that's why I always find it funny for the people who want to say, oh, Marx's concept of the French Revolution as a class war of the bourgeois is wrong because most of them weren't merchants, most of them were lawyers. Obviously, because that is the most vital profession to the creation of a liberal state, because you have to figure out how all of these strangers, all these people who are implicitly holding guns on each other in a constant waking Mexican standoff, how can they lower the guns and deal with one another? That's what the legal system and that's what liberalism created.
Yeah, well said. And I think that individualistic nature of it is also something that in America right now is people don't really understand that as the enemy because it is a stepping stone from moving from feudalism to then hopefully eventually getting to a more collective thing, but because it's this halfway point that was sort of developed by people that then wanted to still maintain their own power, it's still it's anti-solidarity in a lot of ways, and it's really funny because when you watch like a Pepsi commercial or something, what do they tell you? They tell you this is all about you. Pepsi is about you and your experience, and these fucking music festivals and Capital One trying to tell you you have some personal relationship with your credit card that makes it about you, and these things are all I think arrived at celebrating that as a really basic American value as a byproduct of us getting away from solidarity and any way being connected, not being atomized. Like they're trying to tell you being atomized, being individuals separate from each other is somehow a virtue.
Exciting. That's why people fall for it. They're like, I'm Capital One all this time?
It's like a video game.
I worked at the store.
It's like a video game. It is a fantasy of endless interaction and control over a universe. That's what they sell you. And then you spend your whole life being brutally constrained in ways you can never see, but you're still interacting as though it were this limitless fantasy that the pseudo version of it sold you.
And you're just capital. Yeah.
I might pose though that liberalism for its time, that time was still a I think we can say positive step in the right direction.
A positive and necessary step.
Yeah.
Has to be assumed.
Right. And
because communism grows out of liberalism.
Absolutely. But
so you can't break apart the two movements.
And
One
there are
makes
things
the other.
about individualism and the individual that we don't have to necessarily reject.
Yes,
we can bring
absolutely.
that as like that. Yeah, that is a growth, a good positive growth out of the Enlightenment, but it can go too far. Hyper-individualism.
Devil's advocate, let's bring kings back.
We can't mend what's broken there.
I don't mean
can't.
like CEO kings. I mean like kings,
those
holy
connections
kings.
cannot be rebuilt. You have to deal with the individuals we've created. The bag of marbles. We can't really imagine.
We're not going to just
get them back
worship
together.
King Solomon all of a
So
sudden.
we could take the most humanistic strand of liberalism to emerge from it. The thing that came out, fascism and classical liberalism and neoliberalism, they all sprouted out, and then socialism sprouted out, and that is the most humane of the dealing with the crisis of creating liberalism in the first place. It's the most humane. It's the best solution. So we should embrace it as such, as the most humanizing version of a liberal world. That's what it is.
And the Pokemon evolutions of the superstructure, socialism alone has the Firestone.
Absolutely. No, the heart. It literally is the only one with the heart. Because it's the one
Which
that centers
in Pokemon
humans.
is very valuable.
Because
They
it's the one
spell
that
this out the
because the
whole
one that centers humans meaning anything. Because it's the one that is defined by human terms. Because the alienated version, the liberal version, the Nazi version, the neoliberal version, atomizes that and destroys it. And so you don't have that heart anymore. You only relate to each other as theoretical beings who mean nothing to you because their suffering is not your suffering. So you can allow anything to happen to them, and that fatal undermining of trust and solidarity between people eventually, under pressure, obliterates the whole project. So the heart is what you need, is that humanism that only socialism can reproduce out of the fabric that was destroyed by the end of feudalism. It's the only thing that can reproduce, the only vital strand that came before, the thing that made humanity and existence and life possible.
All right, that was year one of Pod Damn America, everyone. I hope you enjoyed that trip down memory lane. Some good stuff in there. Couldn't fit it all in because there was a goddamn good year. There's a lot of good shit in there. But those were a lot of the guests that I really appreciated. All of our homies that we've made throughout the year. So thank you, and thank you for listening. If you would like to hear more of this stuff and hear some of the other stuff that maybe didn't make it on here, smash that Patreon button on patreon.com/PodDamnAmerica. That's how you can support the show and get access to all of our bonus stuff if you can't get enough goddamn podcast. Yeah, that's it. I should plug a couple of things before I get finished up here. I'm going on tour. Philadelphia, I'll be at the Good Comedy Theater on January 11th. That's the closest out-of-town thing I have coming up. And then after that, Atlanta, New Orleans, Lafayette. I'm moving to New Orleans for my birthday. If anyone's in New Orleans, come hang out. I'll put all the info up soon. I'll be in fucking Houston, Austin. I'll be recording an album in Austin. I'm doing some shows with Mishka Shubaly in Texas in the Southwest. And then I'll be opening for Patton Oswalt in Greenville and Jacksonville after that. Got a lot of cool stuff. I'll have the whole poster, the art up, everything up soon. Please check that out. If you live in Brooklyn and you're coming out to these shows we're doing at El Cortez, the next Yoko, I've got a secret headliner, a mystery headliner, a huge headliner that just for a lot of times legal reasons you can't advertise or whatever just because it fucks with people's draw. So come hang out, watch some cool stand-up. We got a bunch of great guests this week, and I'm not crazy this week, so it'll be more put together. Last time, if you came out, if you guys missed it, we had fucking Judah Friedlander. It was awesome. I just didn't have time to hype it because I was, in the fucking mental hospital. But Judah Friedlander's fucking hilarious, and hopefully we'll get him on the show soon. Because he's got good politics, by the way. I don't know if you can tell. But, yeah. So check out Yoko. Also, thanks if you came on Boxing Day to my show with my buddies Too Bad. Hopefully I wasn't too drunk. I don't know. Sometimes you're on stage and you're like, wait, what? How did I get up here? I remember I was just yelling my own name because one of the other bands got really into doing that. I kind of stole their move. Jake Flores. All right. Anyways, guys, this is it. This is year one, Pod Damn America. Thank you so much for supporting the show. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you so much for being the damned. Happy New Year. Hopefully this helped you on your hungover commute to work or whatever the hell you're doing today. Happy New Year's, the damned. Happy New Year's, everyone. And a boo scare to us all. Play me out.